Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Gorilla Gunman. This one's going to be kind of an interesting one because this one is sort of by request. A lot of people have asked me about this. It's my Desert Eagle in 357 Magnum. The reason people have been asking me is because I've been shooting in competition a good bit and on range a lot and running a lot of drills with it. There are certainly videos out there of people shooting them in competition, but they probably haven't taken it quite as far as I have. I've shot it in two, matches, USPSA, Steel Challenge, actually, placed relatively okay at Steel Challenge. Shooting the Desert Eagle and shooting it from concealment, which was a whole interesting thing. And people have been really, really curious how I get mine to run the way that mine runs. Mine is it's an older model. This is actually a Mark 1, Mark 7. Even the guys at Magnum Research, when I sent them the serial number and some stuff about it, they weren't entirely sure, but it's of the era where the Mark 1 and the Mark 7 were functionally the same gun with a couple minor changes. I plugged some stuff into Grok. Grok seems to think that it's a Mark 1. It looks like a Mark 1. It doesn't seem to have most of the Mark 7 features. I think the safety might be pretty similar to the Mark 7, but other than that, it's basically a Mark 1. So it's a much older design, which you would think would make it a lot less conducive to running as well as mine does. So we were curious about how exactly I facilitate that. What do I do? How do I maintain it? What ammo do I use? Things like that, because it certainly seems to run a lot better than you would expect a Desert Eagle to. So I guess we could start with a little bit of history on this, and also why I even attempted to do any of this.
Because I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I smoke my stogie anywhere I want.
So the 357 Magnum Desert Eagle, especially this particular era of them, is pretty interesting. Mostly because, as far as I could tell, Magnum Research IWI. It was a joint project by the two of them that started in 1979. And they were actually trying to solve a somewhat practical problem. So it was the era of revolvers. Everyone was shooting 357 Magnum, 38 Special, 38 Police Specials were, kind of ruled the landscape in terms of duty use, and there was a lot of defensive usage. Revolvers were kind of the thing of the day. Just recently in 1971, 72, the combat magnums, the Model 66s had come out, which was, some of the first revolver designs where instead of having a 357 and 38 special revolver, and then, training pretty much with only 38 special, and then maybe carrying 357 Magnum, you could just train with 357 Magnum and shoot 357 Magnum as your duty or defensive round, and it wouldn't risk damaging the gun. Really, it was meant to shoot lots and lots of Magnum ammunition. That was pretty unusual. That only preceded these by about 7 years. So there really was kind of a practical attempt to have a semi-automatic firearm chambered in the defensive ammo of the day that you could I don't it certainly never was really adopted widespread for any kind of duty usage. I've heard some kind of anecdotal stuff about some cops somewhere using them, kind of, but how much of that was done I really have no idea. But they're a very interesting piece from the time, and these ones specifically. So mine, on top of being from that era, mine is, I don't know if you can see that on the side, be right up there. Mine is an Israeli made. It was made at the IWI factory in Israel, although it wasn't even IWI then. This one would have been IMI, so Israeli Military Industries instead of IWI, Israeli Weapon Industries. But it's a really interesting piece, and I honestly didn't expect to enjoy it at all, but I've become kind of, not necessarily obsessed with it, but it's a really interesting piece from an interesting era, and it's really interesting to But one, it's fun to shoot in competition. Like it's neat to throw, big rocks and shoot fireballs and stuff. That's fun. But also it's kind of interesting to explore. Say you were someone who was, like really invested in, sort of this idea of in that era of like having a semi-automatic handgun chambered in 357 Magnum while everyone else is shooting a revolver. Like, how much performance could you have gotten out of it? Which it turns out a lot,
Like I just got luck of the draw. I got it for like 220 bucks. Yeah.
like a lot more than you'd think. I've done a couple slight modifications to mine. Nothing that you probably wouldn't have been able to do at the time that they came out, other than maybe my grips. They're made out of the G10 or micarta. You probably could have swapped them with something back when it came out. But you can see I think these are Hogue, like they're like a G10 Hogue grips. So they give you a lot more texture, so you can get a better grip than you could have with the like the plastic grips that ship with the ones from this particular time frame. It doesn't have the more rubbery ones that you see on the Mark 7s, and certainly not the new ones. It certainly wasn't like saving your hand from 357 Magnum wasn't really a concern. And also, to be honest, you really don't need it. There's just no need to save your hand from this. The recoil it's not what you'd expect at all. It's like snappy 40. It's not gonna destroy your palms to have a nice hard grip, or at the time hard like plastic grip. I'm sure there were wood ones or something you probably could have gotten when it came out. So I made a couple changes other than that. So you see up on the, let's see, where's my camera? There we go. Up on the front there, I have basically it's just a little strip of skateboard tape, and I do that on almost any gun I've ever shot in competition or any gun I carry. If there isn't like decent texturing, and the metal up here is real. It's aluminum, so it's real smooth and polished. It's not. If your hands are sweaty or something like that, it doesn't give you the best grip. Sometimes the Desert Eagle's relatively heavy, so it's nice to have that you know, nice real firm texture to pull on your draw and stuff like that, and to give it a good surface texture to grip when you're using it. I mean, other than that, let's see, we'll take this apart, which is pretty easy. There's a little pin you push here, and there's a little thing that you rotate right here. Pull that, barrel slides forward and pops off. Your slide comes off, and then your recoil spring assembly comes out. Now, as far as internal modifications, this was something that you could have, I'm sure, reasonably done at the time. I took some relatively simple polishes, and I've just polished just anything that has like metal on metal contact inside the gun. Taken some metal polishes. There we go. You can see I put a nice mirror finish on a lot of the internal surfaces of the gun and things like the feed ramp. Just to make sure that there's a lot of lubricity, when the gun's in operation. Um, so there's a couple things that you have to pay attention to if you're going to use one for any serious use. I don't know if there really is anything you use one for that's serious.
Ow!
Other than, I mean, you can go hunting with them. Um, it's it is if you do everything right. It's reliable enough to where, if you had one for some reason and you were involved in a defensive shooting, it'd work. It'd work fine. Um, like people say that they're unreliable. It's really that they're a misunderstood platform. People don't pay attention to or do the study that's required on how to run them correctly. All right, so here is my dry fire wall. All kinds of targets and little Velcro things so I can rearrange them and put up different sizes. But so when you're dry firing, one of the things to keep in mind is that kind of get a good picture of the iron sights. The iron sights are actually like really far apart because the gun is so long, so they're actually really nice. I don't get why people say that they have shitty irons. It hits a little high. The point of impact is a little high. Typically, you can adjust Get some different front sight posts, probably fix that. But some of the models from this time, I think it's because they're zeroed at like it might be like 100 yards or something like that. So the point of impact is typically a little high. So it's something to be aware of so that you don't draw your gun for whatever you're using it for, and end up throwing one over the top of whatever you're shooting at. So like right about there is kind of where you're aiming if you want to hit something like that. Um, and number one, here's the biggest thing. I mean, changing some surface texture and making things polished is really nice in terms of getting them to run well. The real big thing is ammo selection. So what most people do when they buy a Desert Eagle, whether it's 50, there's only a couple manufacturers of ammo, so you're probably pretty safe there. But with the 44 and the 357 specifically, what people tend to do is they just buy one in 357 or 44, and they go, all right, I have a 44 or I have a 357. They go to Academy or wherever their local store is that sells ammo. They buy some let's say like 357 ammo, like this. It's 357 FMJ, and they try to run their gun on it and it doesn't run, or it runs really intermittently, and they're like, "Oh, this gun's neat, but it kind of sucks."
Fucking thing sucks!
So, Magnum Research, and now Carr, and before that, IMI and Magnum Research, they ship a data sheet with every Desert Eagle they've ever put out. If your Desert Eagle doesn't ship with it, they've got it on their website. You can contact them, they'll send it to you. It's an ammo data chart. And what it does is it details every single ammunition from every single manufacturer that the gun is designed to run with. It is only designed to run with certain kinds of ammo, and they're all typically high-pressure defensive loads. I mean, there's a lot of mass moving around when the Desert Eagle cycles. It has a really long slide, like slide cycle. There's a lot of moving stuff. It needs a lot of back pressure to run the system. It's a gas piston pistol. I mean, it just needs a lot of pressure. So like this right here, whatever this, it's like 357 FMJ from, I think it's like Freedom Munitions or something like that. It's even 158 grain, which most of the recommended ammos are. Doesn't work. Not high power enough. This is like some 357 steel case, and it's also 158 grain, and it advertises that it even has the same velocity as stuff on the ammo data chart. Doesn't work at all. Won't run the gun even a little bit. This, so if you can see this is MagTech 357A, JSP 158 grain, and if you can see right around the bullet there's a really good crimp. This is really, really well-made ammunition, and this will run the gun like an absolute champ. This is the only thing I shoot out of it. Now, I'm not sponsored by MagTech or anything like that. I have no relationship with MagTech of any kind, but they make really high-quality ammo, and they make this ammo. Actually, I talked to the info department at Magnum Research, and this is what they use at the factory. This, and I think there's like one American Eagle bullet. But you have to be specific, not just to the grain and the velocity and the manufacturer, but right down to the bullet construction. So like on the ammo data sheet, it lists, a couple of ammos for 357. And I mean, I had to find the exact round. MagTech 357A JSP 158 grain. That'll run the gun. Other stuff, very hit or miss. And it's one of those things where you don't think about like studying the ammo your gun needs to use specifically when you buy a gun most of the time. Certainly not. Most people buy Desert Eagles because they buy them kind of for the novelty, not really for the practical utility. I'm sure there is someone out there who has. They probably make a perfectly fine bear defense gun. And if you do the amount of work and study that I've done, mine has been perfectly, I won't say perfectly reliable, just because no guns are perfectly reliable, and it is a product of its time. And there's some stuff that you can do to it that'll kind of make it start having some hiccups. Okay, so one of the things that can happen that can cause the gun to have malfunctions sometimes, since it is pretty susceptible to slide slowdown, the slide lock right here, it's really big and it's really robust because it has to hold this gigantic slide back. So what'll happen sometimes is, people think they need to just white knuckle the absolute shit out of a Desert Eagle, so they'll grab it real hard and they'll be basically taking the slide lock and just shoving it really, really hard into the slide while it's trying to reciprocate. Sometimes that can slow it down enough to cause a minor malfunction. I have like mirror polished the underside of my slide and the top of my slide lock. That mitigates it somewhat. It really isn't an issue for me, but it can cause malfunction if you're not careful and you're trying to white knuckle the absolute hell out of the gun, which some people do. Another thing you should invest in: 357 snap caps. The Desert Eagle is robust enough to where it probably won't be damaged if you're dry firing and you're not using snap caps. It's designed to shoot magnum cartridges, but you're doing reloads and function checks and all the stuff you should also be including in your dry fire to get all that technique down. I highly, 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 highly recommend getting them so you can do all the correct operations of the gun, because you will need to learn a lot of little quirks around reloading and dropping the slide and stuff like that. Which you'll need if you're going to shoot it in a match or use it for some kind of practical utility of some kind. So another thing you also need to do on the range when you're shooting and training, I highly recommend going and watching, say, like some Ben Stoker videos on shooting doubles. You need to shoot doubles, and you shoot doubles a lot. And the reason you need to shoot doubles a lot is because I'll put up like a little image here, something like that. Your second shot on every pair you're shooting is you're basically looking through a giant fireball for like a split second. Even though the 357 is strange to shoot because the recoil isn't that bad, but there's a massive, massive muzzle flash every time you pull the trigger, because it's just so much ass in that freaking cartridge. So essentially, if you're shooting fast splits, you're shooting through a fireball. So your second shot is like occluded shooting via the gun itself. It's pretty wild to deal with. So I highly recommend practicing doubles, and go watch some Ben Stoker videos on how to train doubles. Be a really, really, really good idea to do that if you're going to do something nutty like what I do. And yeah, there's a maintenance cycle that goes along with it, but fine enough to where you take it home from the range, you clean it correctly, you lubricate it, use like good lubricant. Like I always use Hops #9. It's actually a good high quality. I've used what is this? It's like Riptide Armory. There's a couple other ones that are like graphene type lubes. It doesn't seem to like those as much as just stuff like Hops. Clean it out with Blast Shine or gun scrub or something like that. Make sure that the real thing that takes it out is stuff in here, because the 357 specifically is really susceptible to slide slowdown. Anything that slows that slide down, either coming back or coming forward, will eventually start to cause malfunctions. And really, almost environmental stuff tends to not really take it out. Like I've dropped it and gotten it sandy and run in the rain and gotten it gross. That doesn't really seem to do much to it, because there's just a lot going on in here. It tends to gunk itself up, is what happens. So about every typically, if I'm doing a competition with it, every 1 to 2 stages, just when I've got some time, like while people are taping, I'll go and make sure that I tape up targets for the next person, or help them reset steel or whatever, and then I'll have my gun over on the the little safe table, and I'll real quickly just pop it open and spray it out with gun scrub and drop some lube in there, and it's good to go. It's fine. What will happen over say like over a significant amount of rounds, like a range day, a whole competition, something like that, is like right kind of up in here and in here on both sides. Sometimes, depending on the rounds, you'll get like some like either some heavier carbon buildup or some lead buildup, and that you'll need to scrub at a little bit with like a wire brush. Car and Magnum Research, they sell like an actual Desert Eagle cleaning kit. It's got brushes and everything you need to maintain the Desert Eagle barrel and all of its operating components. And throw some hops in there, and keep a can of gun scrub with you. You're fine. It'll be all right. Honestly, using the correct ammunition and you doing that, gonna run great. You really won't have any problems unless you're unless you're limp wristing it, or yeah, you have some kind of like actual mechanical problem with the gun. I mean, I didn't even know this until I swapped the springs out. My springs literally had not been changed since probably 1989, which is when Magnum Research told me that this gun was manufactured. They were it was using original recoil springs, as far as I can tell. Um, and the gun was still, as long as I did those things, just running more than fine. Now that I've got, brand new, modern recoil springs in there from the factory. I mean, really, it runs like a champ. I've described it to people like this, like, you know, if I heard someone breaking in the middle of the night, and I had both my Desert Eagle and like, my competition length like PDP sitting there on the nightstand, I'm gonna grab the PDP. But if I woke up in the middle of the night and someone was breaking in, and all that was sitting on the nightstand was the Desert Eagle, yeah, it'd work. I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't feel disadvantaged. It'd be fine. I wouldn't be worried that it wasn't going to work, because I'm, maintain mine correctly and put the right ammo in it. It'd be fine. And it runs so much better than you'd think it would. They have, especially for the era. I mean, so you have no ammo in there. Haven't put a magazine in there or anything. I mean, they have a pretty dadgum phenomenal trigger. They're ergonomically a little wonky because they're kind of heavy and they're blocky and they're large compared to most handguns. But I mean, the trigger really really is like there's like no take up, a little bit of take up, and you can feel the wall, and it's a real easy break. And they have a pretty short reset. I mean, it's a good trigger. The recoil is not as substantial on 357 Magnum as you would think, which makes sense. This is the round that the gun was really sort of first designed to run on. They were kind of like, I think, two semi-automatic. I think there was, at the time that these were being designed and the time that they were coming out and hitting the market, there were like two semi-automatic handguns that were kind of really hitting the market with sort of the same idea. It was this and the Kunin 357, which is a really cool thing too. I'd love to get my hands on one. It's like a 1911 based 357, and the guys at Magnum Research, IWI, were like, well, our platform has space for much bigger rounds, so they threw 44 Magnum in it, and then later the 50 AE. But really, the 357 was sort of what they kind of originally were putting it and designed it around and designed it to run around, and it kind of solved a practical problem, which was, how do you make a pretty reliably functioning, like smooth shooting 357 Magnum, handgun, which and that it's using the same ammunition as most defensive handguns of the day, and instead of having to deal with speed loaders, you can just keep chucking 9-round magazines in there. Like, that's neat. That's interesting. That's somewhat practical. I get it. Now they've moved away from that in later designs. Like I even went to one of the larger local gun stores in Houston. It's almost like a museum. It's called Collector's Firearms, and they had a pretty large selection of Desert Eagles. And I wanted to specifically check out their new ones and just look at I wish I had an example here, but some of the features that make them a little bit different. So like their safety levers are a lot different. Like you see mine is, I mean, it's worn in, but even not worn in, I mean, they're much easier to operate. So here's one of the things when you're dry firing, you're practicing, you need to learn to work around with the Desert Eagle. When you draw the safety, this little, goes up, not down. So safe, fire, which is kind of awkward. It's also real big, so you can't really like hit it with your thumb that easily. You can kind of break your grip and like push it up, or you could use your offhand. Those are great options. What I do is I practice as I build my grip, bring it up and forward, and I kind of roll my thumb forward. See, it's off. So bring it up, draw, push, and as you acquire your sights, boop, guns off, safety, and you're ready to go. The new ones, I mean, I almost feel like I'd want to like clunk and like pop them open. They're really the fitment on a lot of things is really really tight. It's like they don't want anyone to not very intentionally shoot one, which that makes sense, especially considering the people that are usually buying Desert Eagle, or it's not like they're bought to be used a whole lot by people who are going to train a bunch with them and try to use them for some kind of practical purpose most of the time. So that kind of makes sense. These were the last sort of era iteration, at least the Mark Sevens, where they were really. It seems like they designed them with like maybe there was going to be some kind of practical defensive duty-ish usage going on there. But yeah, no. I mean, big thing is the correct ammo. It's the biggest thing. It's the biggest, bigger than any of the other things. Other than no, it's the biggest thing. Maintenance is definitely the secondary thing. Making sure that it's like every 100 rounds or 10 mags. Just throw some lube in there and spray it out. If you're feeling real crazy, scrub it a bit. But as long as you do those, like it'll show up for you. It'll run. You wouldn't have any problem taking one out and shoot a match with it. And if you want to, it's a lot of fun. You should go for it. But yeah, no. So yeah, that's how I get mine to run and keep running. And if you have one and want to go do something like that, it's a heck of an experience. It's a lot of fun. It's really enjoyable. Really like this gun. I'm going to be shooting it in more matches. I've signed up for. I'm going to try and run it even in the. I guess it's the Texas State Open in April, which should be like a level 2, like USPSA major. That'll be a really interesting experience. I'm going to be interested to see how it performs like that, and really, it's more how I perform. I mean,
And a fucking kaboom.
the gun, I have no problem. I don't think the gun is going to be a problem. I don't think it'll perform poorly, other than, it's not, it's not like ergonomically designed like a competition gun. But really be more, how much work do I put in, and how well do I show up, and of course I do a lot of dry fire and stuff like that too. That's the other part. You have to train with it and train with it and train with it. It does have some ergonomic quirks that you're gonna have to work around. But as long as you do the appropriate amount of training and you work around all the quirks, like yeah, you'll have a good time. So yeah, that's how I keep mine running. Like and subscribe. Tune in for more.